Okay, so we will be starting off today's show the same way we start off every Monday edition here on the Zach Hurl Sports Podcast, and that is with my top 10 takeaways of the week from college basketball. So without further ado, boys, hit the music. Here we go. Takeaway number 1. Alabama is playing the best basketball in the SEC and is a top 10 team right now. And Nate Oates, their head coach, deserves a lot of credit for that. Think about it for a second. Since Colin Sexton came to Alabama, I've always been someone that has been on their bandwagon in terms of Alabama possibly being a team that has a very attractive campus, a very attractive athletic program, and even though it's not a basketball powerhouse historically, I always viewed Alabama as a chance that could be, as a team that could be very successful. I viewed Alabama as a team that could, with all the talent they had, I viewed Alabama as a team that I thought could make a run over the last couple of years. And it obviously didn't work out with Avery Johnson, I understand that. But Nate Oates, he had his moments last year. And I'll admit, early in this season, I kind of looked at the way Alabama was playing when I saw, okay, they lost to Western Kentucky. I saw they got blown out by Stanford. They lost to Clemson as well, and I kind of just said to myself, what are we doing here? Where's the progress? Well, a couple weeks ago, their head coach, Nate Oates, actually decided to suspend one of their best players, senior John Petty, and really since then, Alabama, has turned into one of the more consistent teams in all of college basketball, one of the top 10 teams in the country, and right now, I do view them as a favorite to win the SEC. Petty, Shackelford, Herb Jones was back the other day and looked healthy, and Arkansas isn't a bad team. We're going to get to them in a little bit. Alabama and Nate Oates blew them out on Saturday, and that's following a game against Kentucky where they went into Rupp Arena and destroyed them. Props to Alabama. Takeaway number 2. The Iowa Hawkeyes are starting to gain my attention, and I totally understand everyone is going to say, Zach, what are you talking about? Iowa has been a consensus top 5 to top 7 team really throughout the whole season. But at the same time, I remember watching Iowa against Gonzaga and just saying to myself, these guys aren't even on the same level right now. And I never trusted the Iowa Hawkeyes' ability to just play defense. And they deserve some credit because the last couple weeks, the Iowa Hawkeyes have turned out some wins that have been super, super impressive on the road, at home, and they've been very impressive. You see, Iowa had a 96-73 road win against Northwestern the other day. They also had a blowout win over Minnesota at home, and they are looking like a big, big threat in the Big Ten. I feel like most people would agree that right now, Iowa and Michigan are the two most consistent teams in the Big Ten and are probably the two biggest threats to win the league right now. I would still have Wisconsin in that conversation. But if Iowa plays defense, they're going to win games, man. I think their team, in terms of roles, does fit together really well when you have a star in Luka Garza and shooters around him in McCaffrey and Frederick and Bohannon and some of their young players as well, including Keegan Murray, has really been coming on. So Iowa's going to be a team to watch for me, and they're really going to go as far as Luka Garza could really take them. We all know just how talented of a player Luka really is, and I'm going to be curious to see if Iowa could keep this going. They have a game on Thursday night at home against Indiana. That should be a game they have, and the way the Big Ten is looking right now, it's a grinded-out league. You're going to take your L's, but Iowa is as big of a threat as anyone. Takeaway number 3. I feel for James Bouknight, and if you missed it, the UConn guard had surgery this past week, and he's going to be out for the near future. But I'll say this about the UConn Huskies. There were a lot of people that were ranking UConn in their top 25 this past week, and I was almost one of them. They missed the cut for my top 25 by the slimmest of margins. But I'll say this. Right now, I do think there is a legitimate argument to be made that UConn is the third best team in the Big East. I think it's between them and Seton Hall, and then you have Creighton and Villanova at the top, and then from there it could go any way you want. But at the same time, James Bouknight is a difference maker for UConn, and I understand what has made UConn so good throughout this early portion of the season, at least in my opinion, has been the contributions of other guys. UConn did not leave the state of Connecticut during the non-conference portion of their play. And to me, that was a legitimate worry for this Husky team going into the Big East Conference play. However, their first real Big East road game, they're playing against Marquette. They're down by 18 in the second half. James Bouknight gets hurt, and somehow, some way, they find a way to win. A super impressive effort. We all know how great of a coach Danny Hurley is, and he gets his players to buy in. And look, we all know it. College basketball is better when UConn is good. And in the Big East, back where they belong, I do think the Huskies are a team that could make some noise if they could get James Bouknight back. I love Isaiah Whaley. I love Tyler Polley coming off the torn ACL the way he's been playing. Hopefully they could get Akuk back, a guy that suffered a devastating Achilles injury last year. But I like this UConn Husky team. Danny Hurley deserves a lot of credit. They actually have a big game against St. John's coming up later today. Takeaway number 4. The ACC is officially wide open. And Virginia may just be the team to beat. And if you've listened to this show, you guys know that I have been someone who has been on the Clemson Tiger bandwagon throughout the start of the season. I love the blend of veteran talents and experience and toughness that the Clemson Tigers have. However, Virginia, Tony Bennett, and their defense went into the Littlejohn Coliseum on Saturday night and not only beat them, but they absolutely destroyed them. The Virginia lead at one point was, I believe, 17-2, and the game just got away from Clemson. Now, if you were to ask me who is winning the ACC, I think the two teams that play on Saturday at Littlejohn Coliseum would be my two frontrunners. Louisville also took a brutal loss on Saturday night to Miami without a bunch of their star guys. So I think when you look at Virginia and Clemson, they're two very good teams. But if Virginia can play like that, their best defensive effort of the season, maybe they got something. And I understand their offense is never going to be this big-time elite unit, but Sam Hauser could score. Kihei Clark could score. I really like the way freshman Reese Beekman has been playing for Tony Bennett. I think sooner rather than later, he is going to be a legitimate player for this Virginia Cavaliers team. And to be honest with you guys, I just don't know if the ACC is very good right now. There isn't a team right now in the ACC that I look at and say, okay, that's going to be a team that come March I'm targeting to pick to make a Final Four. And maybe by the time we hit March, my opinion will change on that. But at the same time, Virginia and Clemson, man, what a game. Virginia just dominates them throughout. And I'll be curious to see how exactly Clemson responds from here, because I was someone that at least going into the season was not really on that Clemson bandwagon. But at the same time, they've played really well. And this is only their second loss of the season. They go to Georgia Tech and to Florida State their next two games. If they can split those, I think they'll be in pretty good shape. Takeaway number 5. We briefly spoke about the Alabama-Arkansas game, and I complimented Nate Oates on how great of a coaching job he did. However, I am disappointed in Arkansas, and I was so surprised to watch an Arkansas team on Saturday come out. And keep in mind, this is after Tuesday night where they played LSU and not only lost, they got demolished. The game was over after 5 minutes, and still Arkansas comes out on Saturday against Alabama. And keep in mind, this is a banged-up Alabama team. I understand that Herb Jones and them actually ended up playing. However, at the same time, when you look at this Alabama team, there was no reason for them to beat Arkansas by 30 the way they did. And if I am a fan of the Arkansas Razorbacks, I obviously look at Eric Musselman and the job he's been able to do so far this season. It's been super impressive, but I was just super surprised to see an Arkansas Razorback team come out and play with that lack of passion, with that lack of identity. And that is something that, while watching Arkansas basketball over the last couple years, that is just something I wouldn't expect, especially from an Eric Musselman coach team. And I think when you look at the way these guys have been playing over the last couple weeks, especially in the SEC, Auburn has been playing significantly better. I think there's a really good chance that when you look at the Razorbacks, they could be in trouble. Now, luckily for them, they did get Justin Smith back. That's going to be a big addition. But one of the other main things I noticed with Arkansas here tonight was that besides Moses Moody, there was really no one else in that starting lineup that was willing to score and that was willing to take over the game. And if I'm a fan of the Razorbacks in my opinion, that is a huge, huge issue that needs to be fixed sooner rather than later. Takeaway number 6. We're going to get into Kentucky in a little bit and talk about how they are the most disappointing team in college basketball so far this season. But not too far behind is Bobby Hurley and the Arizona State Sun Devils. When Remy Martin announced that he was coming back to school, I thought the Sun Devils were actually a team that had a legitimate chance to win the Pac-12 championship. I think they had a chance to be maybe a sleeper Final Four team. And I remember watching them on opening night against Villanova, and I gave them a legitimate shot to win that game. However, since then, they have been super disappointing. And I understand Arizona State is a team that has had some COVID issues over the last couple weeks, so their roster hasn't been 100%. But you can't go out there and lose to Oregon State. This is an Arizona State team that barely beat Grand Canyon. They also lost by a decent amount at home to USC, lost at home to UCLA. Arizona State is one of the more disappointing teams in college basketball, and especially when you consider the Pac-12. There are some good teams. Colorado is really good. UCLA is really good. USC is really good, but there is no one in that league that when you line up the rosters, Arizona State can't compete with. And to be honest, it looks to me that Remy Martin and Josh Christopher, the two guys that, to be honest, they should be relying for to get buckets, they're just not getting the job done. And if you are a fan of the Sun Devils, that is a big, big problem that needs to get solved sooner rather than later. Because Bobby Hurley, a lot of people talk about him being the guy who eventually is going to replace Coach Mike Krzyzewski at Duke. And to be honest, when watching Arizona State, I don't see that at all. And if you're a Sun Devil fan, that's a big disappointment considering the fact I do think Bobby Hurley's done a good job taking over and changing the culture of the program. But from an X's and O's basketball perspective, I'm disappointed in Arizona State, and I feel like this happens every year. Bobby Hurley is not a very good basketball coach. We'll stay in the Pac-12, and we will actually also stay with the narrative of some of the more disappointing teams in the country. And for me, this is actually going to be the Utah Utes. And I understand that Utah, in a lot of people's preseason rankings, were not a team that everyone had circled as a squad that could possibly make a deep run, but I actually labeled them as a sweeper. I looked at this Utah roster and saw, oh wow, these Utes beat Kentucky last year. That was a super impressive win. And I looked at some of their other young talent, and I actually thought they could get better and better and better as the season went on. And on Saturday night, coming off a big-time home win against Stanford, probably Utah's best win of the season, they're playing Cal. And if you followed Cal Golden Bears basketball over the last couple of years, you will realize that it's nothing special. And if you're a Pac-12 team like Utah that needs every single win you could get, you have to beat Cal at home, especially when you have a double-digit lead at the half, and Utah just completely choked that game away. And Larry Krystkowiak is a coach that, when you compare his salary to some of the other coaches in college basketball, he is making a lot of money. And he's done a lot since he's taken over as the head coach of Utah. But this is going to be 5 seasons in a row, if they don't make it, that Utah would be in position to miss the NCAA tournament. Obviously, they didn't make it last year. But I am very disappointed in the Utah Utes right now, and they're just losing a bunch of games that they should be winning, and in others, they're just not even competitive. And I understand Rylan Jones isn't your big and prototypical college point guard. However, at the same time, if I was a fan of Utah, I would be super, super disappointed given the way my team has played over the last couple weeks. And the Pac-12 is once again a wide-open league. I think Utah has talent to compete in that league. Unfortunately, their coaching is just not getting the job done. Takeaway number 8. I wanted to give a shout-out to Chris Holtmann and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Because not only are the Buckeyes one of the best teams in the Big Ten, but they are super well coached. And they went into Illinois the other day and made an absolute statement. They went in there and were just hitting shot after shot after shot. And the most impressive thing about it was the fact that they were missing one of their top guards in C.J. Walker. C.J. Walker is a player that is very important to this Ohio State Buckeye team. And still, even without him, they were just hitting shot after shot after shot. It was a super impressive effort. And when I look at the Buckeyes, I do think they are definitely a legitimate team in the Big Ten that could compete. And I have the Buckeyes ranked inside my top 12. They are, I think, a team that a lot of people throughout the country are sleeping on. And when you look at this Ohio State Buckeye team, I believe that Chris Holtmann and the job he's done since he's gotten there has been super underrated, and the Buckeyes are a team to watch out for. This is a team that lost Caleb Wesson. This is a team that lost Andre Wesson, but I believe they've done a really good job at regrouping and getting as much talent as possible back to Columbus. And Chris Holtmann, we saw what he could do at Butler, right? We saw that it doesn't take all the talent in the world to necessarily get the job done at Ohio State for a coach like Chris Holtmann. And I'm telling you, man, watching them against Illinois, even without CJ Walker, that game was never close. I never thought for a second that the Buckeyes were in danger of losing that game, and Illinois has to regroup. They are one of the more disappointing teams right now in college basketball. They're officially out of my top 25, and I did believe that the Illini were a team that going into the season maybe could make the Final Four. Obviously, it hasn't worked out that way. Takeaway number 9. Another team I'm starting to panic about is Rutgers, and especially because their best player at the beginning of the season, Ron Harper, just doesn't look the same. And I understand he's coming back from an injury, so it may take some time for him to just get readjusted and all things of that nature. But I mean, man, if you're a fan of the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, after a pretty good start to the season, it's been rough. You lose at home to Iowa, you lose at home to Wisconsin, and you lose at home to Ohio State. We said before the season started that it was very questionable to see what exactly this Rutgers team could do when you consider the fact that last year, one of the main reasons why they were so good, I believed, was because of their fans and how rowdy they made that rack. And especially, it's very uncomfortable considering the fact that it is one of the toughest places to play in college basketball. It's a very weird-looking, abnormal arena. And still, these Scarlet Knights have been finding a way in the beginning of the season. However, later in the season, they just have not been able to get the job done. And when you look at the upcoming schedule for Rutgers, this is the problem with playing in the Big Ten. It really doesn't get any easier, to say the least. After losing at home to Iowa and Ohio State and Wisconsin, their next couple games are on the road. They're going to go to Penn State. They're going to go to Indiana. They will host Michigan State, and then they will go to Northwestern. I think there's a legitimate chance Rutgers finishes that stretch with a record worse than 2-2. And if they do, Steve Pikiell is really going to have to regroup and get his guys refocused on what's at stake. Because I still believe in this Rutgers core. I really do. I believe in Geo Baker, who, to me, doesn't even look 100% healthy. I believe in Ron Harper. I believe in so many of the other guys on this on this Scarlet Knight team, and still they just have flat out not been able to get the job done, which is a huge problem for Rutgers. And takeaway number 10, I think it may be it for Jim Boeheim and the Syracuse Orange, because when I look at this Orange roster, I do believe that they have talent to compete in the ACC. And when I look at some of the natural scoring ability that this Syracuse Orange team has compared to some prior years, I do believe that they could be super duper talented and could use that scoring to their advantage. However, over the last couple weeks, in typical Syracuse fashion, they've taken some bad losses that flat out I would have not expected them to take at all, including losing twice to Pitt. And I understand Pitt is not as bad as everyone makes them out to be. I think Champagnie is a phenomenal player. Jeff Capel very slowly is starting to do a decent job turning things around there. But at the same time, when you look at this St. John's team, when you look at this Syracuse team, they're disappointing. They should be better. And the fact that Syracuse is no longer just a shoo-in to make the NCAA tournament each and every year, I feel like that kind of tells me all you need to know, especially when you consider the fact how good of a job Syracuse is. You remember that stretch from like 2009 to 2013? Each and every year, Syracuse was just a lock to make the NCAA tournament. Whatever happened to those days? And if I was an Orange fan, you obviously have to appreciate everything Jim Boeheim has been able to do for your program. But man, losing to Pitt twice in a span of a week, that's tough, especially the first time. If you watch the game, not only were they at home, but they really did everything in their power to lose that game, which if I was a fan of Syracuse would be a huge problem. They also competed with North Carolina the other night, but straight up were not able to get the job done. If I was a fan of the Syracuse Orange, I would be very disappointed in the way my team has played over the last couple weeks.